Love becomes an inescapable shackle, and waiting turns into a frozen pain that crushes the heart. The shaman who stakes her life against the Imugi, that has waited for 1,000 years. And, in the unseen darkness, the whispers of the awakening spirits slowly emerge. Episode 7 of Wigging begins a fight with no breathing room. The night was quiet. However, that quiet was an ominous silence. A night with not a breath of wind and not a single bird flying. Everything seemed to hold its breath, and only silence hung heavily in the air. Steel walked carefully, carrying the delicate body. Although the delicate body was light, that lightness instead weighed heavily on Steel's heart. Leaning against the wall, Yeori whispered softly with a trembling voice, as if she had met an old dream again. "I've missed you so much for 13 years. And now that you're right in front of me, it's only natural to brush past each other, collide, and feel something in our hearts. I'm a person too, and I'm a woman." But Gangcheol didn't stop walking. However, behind his seemingly indifferent face, his heart was racing. "Yeah, I'm not even that guy's Yoon Gap. So why is my heart swaying unnecessarily?" A moment so poignant that even the slightest breath hurts. However, there was a dark energy slowly creeping in through the cracks. The smell of rotten water, the scent of death, the decaying energy seeping into the royal palace, was chilling enough to swallow even the sound of breathing. Yeori knew. As she touched the cold floor, Yeori quietly clenched her trembling hands, realizing that if she just kept hiding like this, she would eventually lose everything. "I will make a choice. Not for anyone else, but for myself." Yet the world did not easily grant her will. On the Empress's body, thin and dark, blisters were spreading, like a snake writhing. A black line was crawling down her skin. Yeori swallowed her breath, feeling the cold chill penetrate to her bones. If the Su Sal Gi had descended to the lower Dantian, this was not a simple illness. Someone has hidden traces of death in the Empress's pillow. The rotten energy had awakened and was gnawing at the royal family. As a deathly aura, the palace was filled with the stench of decay. People began to suspect each other, while turning a blind eye to their fears. Who has brought this death? Who has sown the curse? Faith has been shattered, and the royal family is quietly, yet surely, collapsing. The queen has already been struck by the assassin's blade and has fallen ill. Yeori is also enduring the same curse. With her whole body, the steel could only be watched. He made up his mind. It was a plan to bring the king, make him hold a sword, and spill blood to lure the spirits. The darkness has not yet revealed itself. However, its presence was clearly nearby, watching, holding its breath. It was waiting for an opportunity. Yeori gathered her last remaining strength, while lying on her aching body. Though her body couldn't move, her senses were sharper than anyone else's. And then, she let out a single cry. "It's a trap!" Her scream shook the air. However, no one backed down. Neither the king nor the steel could stop this fight for their lives. This battle was the final decision to protect Yeori. Time seemed to stand still in the silence. In a moment where even a breath was not allowed, the king quietly grasped the sword in his hand. "If you want my blood, shall I give it to you?" His voice was low and firm. Before he finished speaking, the king drew his own palm. A thin membrane burst, and red blood slowly fell into the darkness. The smell of blood gradually spread, and the darkness cautiously writhed. Along with it, the steel held its breath. The ghost had not yet revealed itself. But everyone knew, the storm is already at the door. And in the 7th episode of Wigging, the story pauses for a moment. At the brink of a breathless confrontation, riding on the scent of blood, darkness was quietly approaching. Love can sometimes be a salvation, and at other times, it becomes the deepest wound. The Imugi that waited 1,000 years, at the end of that wait, met the shaman, Yeori, who seeks to defy her fate. And now, in episode 8 of the dark tale that shakes the royal family, Wigging, all truths begin to slowly emerge. The night was deep. The red blood flowing from the king's hand dripped onto the cold ground. The ghost in the darkness which swallowed even the sound of breathing, has yet to reveal itself. However, everyone knew, this silence barely moved my aching body, which knows that it is a prelude to the storm that is about to strike. Lying in bed, I reached out my hand towards the steel and the king. It's a trap, a powerless scream. However, no one could step back. The king stood there, bleeding, while the steel held its breath. With the sword in hand, everything was a decision, made to protect Yeori. At the moment when tension reached its peak, something began to writhe in the darkness. With the stench of rotten water, the cursed creature, a twisted being, revealed itself. And Magdal Steel immediately drew his sword. The king did not back down. The rock moved swiftly. It emitted a poisonous aura while dodging. The blade, steel, faced the attack of the rock head-on. And the king held his ground until the end, even while bleeding. After a breathless battle, with swords and life, Gangcheol ultimately defeated the rock. However, he too was deeply wounded, and ended up collapsing. Yeori staggered and approached Gangcheol. Yeori, standing next to the steel that had collapsed after being hit, gathered her last strength and began the shamanic ritual. She set up a scarecrow, and called the spirit of the stone. The stone was drawn into the scarecrow. The energy of the struggling Magdal began to gradually subside. Yeori prayed while sweating profusely. Please go. The stone, trapped inside the scarecrow, approached his daughter, for a brief moment, to say his last goodbye. However, that meeting was different from what he had expected. The stone pressed his daughter until the end, and couldn't even say the words, "I love you." Gangcheol tilted his head while watching the scene. Even while saying goodbye to my daughter, it may seem like a reproach, but Yeori understood. Yeori quietly murmured that there was a deep paternal love contained in that short, awkward meeting. "I love you." I just couldn't bring myself to say that one word. And so, the stone disappeared into the air, like a small drop of tear. Gangcheol gathered his thoughts and stood up. His gaze at Yeori was no longer indifferent. That night, Gangcheol intentionally made it rain, hoping that Yeori could rest. Even for a moment, the two stayed at a small tavern. There, Gangcheol finally confessed, "Is this heart, this feeling, yours? Why do I feel so dizzy? When I see you, I don't really know if this is just a prank that I've experienced. Because I'm trapped in a human body." The voice of steel was low and trembling. "I have always wondered how you are doing while I am like this. I couldn't answer whether your smile right now is for me or for Yoon Gap." My heart was racing, and my mind was in chaos. She couldn't admit that she was smiling at steel. A smile directed at someone who shouldn't be smiled at was a sin. She turned her head and closed her heart again. Another fight was breaking out within the royal palace. King Lee Jung was interrogating the blind judges one by one, searching for the hidden forces that shook the royal family. However, what blocked the way was none other than the courtiers inside the palace. Peng San shamelessly brought up the story of the eight-footed ghost from the late king's era, stirring up painful memories for Lee Jung. "Your Majesty, do you wish to see that eight-footed ghost that possessed the late king again?" Lee Jung's hands trembled. Seeing him like that, the officials, including Kwok Sang-chung and An Sok-ju, reacted even more openly. In the end, Lee Jung had to release Peng San without any results. At that moment, Lee Jung-un made a decision. Investigate discreetly. Through the eerie glow of the night, the truth was revealed about Peng San, the judges, and even Kim Bong-in. The fact that there was a ritual to expel the Palchiakwi before Neobdiak died in the palace. She immediately went to find Lee Jung. In April of the year of the cat. What happened then? Lee Jung-un finally spoke up. The late king was possessed by the eight-footed spirit. So, we had to sacrifice Neobdiak. Yeori's heart has collapsed. It wasn't Gangcheol. It was Palchiak Gwi, the one who killed Grandma. She shed tears of remorse. Gangcheol, who believed he had killed Grandma. However, the real culprit was the darkness that resided within the royal family. At that moment, the true mastermind shaking the royal family revealed themselves. It was none other than Prime Minister Kim Bong-in. With a cold expression, Kim Bong-in, who pressures Pungsan, said, "The one who ruined all the plans is weak." And Pungsan lowered his head in response. And in the shrine, the eerie voice of the eight-footed ghost echoed, a terrifying roar that shakes the entire royal family. Episode 8 of Wigging. The suffocating night has not yet ended. The dragon that has embraced 1,000 years, the shaman, defying a steel destiny. The black hand that shakes the fragile royal family, Kim Bong-in. And in this moment, where everything is intertwined and shaken by the breath of the eight-footed ghost, approaching on the scent of blood, Wigging asks us, can fate truly be reversed? A story that has not yet ended. In the next episode, a deeper and more intense battle awaits. This was Into the K-Drama. Subscribing and liking is love. Let's walk together on a journey that defies fate.